This pasuk Gimel and pasuk Chaf Aleph. Third pasuk. Vayeta Yitzchak LaHashem lo nochach ishto akekorihi. Yitzchak prayed to Hashem on behalf of his wife because she was barren. Vayoseh lo Hashem, as Hashem answered him, Vatar Rivka ishto. Rivka became pregnant. Although she was barren, it was a miracle. So over here, it's interesting. We find that Yaakov initially had worked 14 years for both wives, for Rachel and Leah. Initially, he had worked for Rachel, and then Lavan had deceived him and had switched Rachel and put Leah in her place. Then he worked another 7 years for Rachel. But he married Rachel immediately. But he worked 14 years. After 14 years, in the 14th year, Yosef was born. At the end of the 14 years. And Yaakov says to Lavan, I'm ready to go back. I fulfilled my obligation. I worked 14 years. I'm leaving. Lavan says to Yaakov, I beg of you not to leave. We'll negotiate another deal. What would you want for you to stay? So he says, look, until now I've worked for you. And Lavan says, through divining, I understand that all my wealth, all my blessing is only because of you. Therefore, I don't want you to leave. So they cut the deal. And he stayed another 6 years to create his wealth. But why did he want to leave after 14 years? So Rashi over there cites Chazal that when Yosef was born, he realized, he understood it's time to leave. Why? Because there's a pasuk in Ovadia. Ovadia was a convert. Ovadia was a prophet. And he was an Edomite. Ovadia was the courtier in the court of Achav. And he's the one, when Achav had killed all the prophets, Ovadia had gone, because Achav really didn't know who he was. He was a tzaddik and he was a prophet. And he had taken 100 Nevi'im, 100 prophets, and he put 50 in one cave and 50 in another cave. And due to Ovadia, prophecy continued. Otherwise, Achav would have killed all the prophets. Prophecy would have come to an end at that time. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that a convert cannot become a prophet. So why was Ovadia a prophet? He was a convert. He was an Edomite. So the Gemara explains that because only due to his sacrifice, because if Achav would have any inkling what Ovadia had done, he would have killed Ovadia. Despite that, he was willing to risk his life for the sake of prophecy, to guarantee that prophecy should continue. So due to his sacrifice for the sake of prophecy, Nevuah, Hashem endowed him with this capacity. Hashem communicated with him. That's why Ovadia became a Navi, although he was a convert and he was an Edomite. And Ovadia writes, Beis Yaakov le'esh, Beis Esav lekash. The house of Yaakov is like fire, and the house of Esav is like straw. If you put straw to fire to straw, you attach them, the straw is immediately consumed by the fire. So he knew that so why Yosef? Why was he sufficient to stand up against Esav? Because Yosef is lehovo. That the pasuk ends. Beis Yaakov is eish, Beis Esav is kash, straw, Beis Yosef lehovo. Beis Yosef is a flame. How do you attach the fire to the straw? A flame has to reach out, and that consumes the straw. Yosef is referred to as Sitno Shel Esav. He is the opposition of Esav. Through Yosef, Esav will be destroyed. That's why when Yosef was born, Yaakov says, I'm ready to go back. Till then, he would not be able to contend with Esav as a force, of a negative force, but now that Yosef is born, now he's ready to go back. Because Beis Yosef is Lahovo, is the flame. So the Baal HaTurim says, when it says over here, Vatar Rivki Ishto, the word Ishto. Ishto is Begematria Kash Ve'esh. Gematria is straw and fire. Kash Ve'esh. Yaakov in Utero was Eish. Esav is Kash. And this was the agitation which he had felt in the womb. You understand, they cannot coexist. And therefore, this was the agitation. So this was from the very beginning, the opposing forces, the good and evil, already were battling in Utero because they cannot coexist. Okay? That's Kash and Eish. Ishto.
Rabbi, can I just ask one quick question? You mentioned that it was a miracle that Rivka had children.
It says she was barren.
Right, she was barren, meaning that anybody who is it barren means that she cannot have children? Is that what we mean?
She had, it says by Sari Menu, she had no reproductive organs.
Right.
She didn't have it. A Korah could mean the different levels of a person could be infertile. Humanly, it was impossible for her. The Torah says it was impossible to have a child. Rivka, and yet miraculously, due to Hashem responding to Yitzchak's tefillah, she overcame this barrenness.
Right. So my only question was that if someone is infertile, is it always considered a nace, a miracle, when they have a child?
No. Today, with medicine, with fertility, that's called derech hateva. You know, let's say they come up and they're able to implant, like you have heart transplants, and you have you could have the fallopian tube implants. You have certain implants, uterus implants. It's no longer a miracle. I mean, initially, to be able to come up with the method to do the heart transplant, it's miraculous. But once it becomes teva. That becomes part of the natural order. Here, like out of nowhere, it develops. It's like, God forbid, a person loses an arm, and the arm grows by itself. It's a miracle, right? It's never happened before, and within the natural process, things like that don't happen. That was the kind of miracle that happened to Rivka Imenu. She was Akora, impossible, okay? So therefore, okay, now there's the famous question which is asked, and it's asked from all the pulpits, okay? And Yitzchak was a patriarch. And we find something interesting here. The Torah tells us now, the children, the sons were agitating in her innards. Why is this happening to me? So Rashi says she didn't realize she was pregnant with twins. And she had such pain, she thought she would die from this. She went to seek out a divine reading on this. She couldn't figure it out. So Rashi says, what's Vatelech Lidrosh? Shem. To Shem ve'ever, Shem was the son of Noach. He was still alive. Lidrosh Hashem, Sheyaglo Matev Sofa. To get a reading on this. What's going to be? How's this going to end? V'yoma Hashem lo. And Hashem said to her, Shnei goyim b'nei, you have two nations in your womb, u'shnei lumim me'ach yiparedu, and two kingdoms will emanate, will separate from your womb. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Lo melom yemotz, and one will be more powerful than the other. They will not be of equal power. Rav yavut zoyer, and the greater will be subjugated to the younger. So Rashi says, V'yom Hashem lo chav gimel al yidei shaliach, through an agent, l'shem ne'emar b'ruach hakodesh. Shem received this through divine inspiration. V'amalo shnei goyim, okay, two nations. Goyim, we'll leave that right now. Now, the question is this: Avram was a prophet, correct? Now, firstly, why did Rivka share this with Yitzchak? Exactly what he said. You have two nations. One is a representation of good, the other one's evil. They're at odds forever, and each one is trying to overpower the other because they cannot coexist, good and evil. If evil has the upper hand, good is subjugated to the evil, and if the good has the upper hand, evil is subjugated. Why did Yitzchak was in the dark. Yitzchak wanted to give the Bechorah, the Brocha, to Esav. He understood Esav was not Yaakov, but he didn't understand that he was evil. Rivka understood he was evil. So why did she share this with Yitzchak? Now, when she had this issue, not knowing what was going on, why don't you go to Avram? Avram was a Navi, was a prophet. Why don't you go to Yitzchak? Yitzchak's a prophet. You know what the answer is? She did go. She went to Avram and she asked Avram, what's going on? He says, I don't know. Why didn't he know? Because why did Avram pass away 5 years before his time? Because if he would know the true nature of Esav, it would be contrary to the bracha, the promise that he'd given Avram that when he passes away, he'll pass away b'seva tova, in a good old age. And that's the reason why Rashi, last week's Parsha, had said, that's why Yishmael did tshuva before Avram died, passed away. That's seva tova. When he passed away, everything was in order. Yishmael had done tshuva. If he would have known where Esav was going, that he was going, that's what ultimately he was going to turn out to be, it would have been undermined the seva tova. Therefore, Hashem could not communicate this reality with Avram. What about Yitzchak? Hashem could not tell this to Yitzchak. Why? Didn't communicate it because the whole concept of Esav Soni Liakov, this opposition of the forces, what really launched it? Because Yaakov took the Bechorah from Esav. Yitzchak wanted to give the Bechorah. He was the Bechor. He wanted to give the brachos of the Bechorah to Esav, not knowing the true nature of Esav was, that he was truly evil. So Yitzchak had to be kept in the dark, not knowing the true nature of Yitzchak, of Esav. Therefore, Rivka understanding this, that Avram had no reading, Yitzchak had no reading, and only Shem had the reading, that means it was something not to be shared under any circumstance. Okay? That's the reason why Rivka did not share. It's not, people say, he was much older than she was, the relationship, it wasn't a good marriage, chas v'sholom. They say all kinds of things. Chas v'sholom. If you read the script as you're supposed to read the script, you understand this is something that had to be kept from Yitzchak under no circumstance could Rivka share this with Yitzchak. And even more so, we see the level of guile, of deception that Esav had, then unless Hashem would tell you that it was impossible to figure it out. He was such a charlatan. He was able to present himself in such a guise, it was impossible to read him. Impossible. We find later, when the final confrontation came about, 36 years after they had seen one another, and Yaakov prepared for three things. Tefillah, Doron, Milchama. Those were the three things. When he finally came to confront Esav, he said, he was Mispalel, he said, Hatzileni no miyad ochi miyad Esav. Save me from the hand of my brother, the hand of Esav. So Chazal say, Ochi, my brother Ochi, and Esav, he's Esav. So what does Esav mean? That although I know he's Esav, but he has the power of persuasion and warmth, that he's able to disarm me, and I will let my guard down and he will kill me. So therefore, always allow me to be in a position to sense who he is, that I should not be vulnerable to his attack. Could you understand? Nobody knew Esav better than Yaakov. And yet, Yaakov was concerned that due to his deception and his guile, he's able to somehow disarm him. That was the power. And that was the power of Esav. Now, it's interesting. Why was Yaakov able to stand up to Esav? We read that on Yom Kippur, there were two goats, right? And the Kohen Gadol would draw lots. One lot was Lashem, the other lot was Lazozel. And the other was thrown down a mountainside in the desert, and it carried all the sins of Klal Yisrael. That was the Sar Lazozel. And as the Ramban explains there, the person who took that goat, he became contaminated. Because all the sins of Klal Yisrael were on that goat, the person who actually would take that goat would assume this very intense level of contamination. Chazal tell us that every year, whoever was chosen to take that goat out into the desert did not live out his year. Did not live out his year because of the level of intensity of impurity which came upon him. He was exposed to that. He could not survive the year. He would die. That's what that goat represented. Now, why is it soyer? So the Ramban over there explains. It seems to be, what is it? It's like it's bringing a korban to the demons, to the shadim, to some kind of deity. It's idolatry. So the Ramban explains, Samach Mem, which we don't even pronounce the name, which represents Satan, where is his main location? It's in the desert. All the nether forces, because Hashem would not allow that should be his so-called stronghold among people. It's out in the wilderness where it's total desolation. That's the desert. That's where it is. So Satan is known as the ultimate prosecutor of Klal Yisrael. Yom Kippur is the ultimate day of Rachmim. So what does he do? He sends him, he says, what is it analogous to? A king has a banquet, and his slaves may disrupt the banquet unless you somehow throw him a few crumbs. So what do? You take some of the menu and you give the slaves, they should eat. They should have some of that fare. And because of that, they're not going to disrupt the banquet. By giving the Sor Lazozel, which carries all this impurity, to Satan, it's not a korban, but it's to satisfy him, to distract him, that he shouldn't disrupt, to try to prosecute Klal Yisrael on Yom Kippur. That's the Ramban over there, okay? Now, and he split, why is the Sor? The Sor is, what's the difference? The Gemara tells us, what's the difference between a sheep and a goat? The hair of a sheep is called fleece. It's called tzemer. The hair of a goat is called hair, sar. It's goat's hair. The other is called wool. What's Soir? Soir is Esav. Soir is a reincarnation of what Samach Mem is. The Malach, the angel that fought Yaakov to try to destroy him, that was Samach Mem. Yaakov defeated the angel. That's what became Yisrael. That's what became Yisrael. So that's the Soir. Now, what is Yaakov? Yaakov is what? Ishtam Yoshiv Oholim. He's the man of the tent, the man of Torah. The only way, as we have in Mesilas Yesharim, you're able to contend with the Yetzer, with the evil inclination, which is Samach Mem, is only with the Torah itself. Barasi Yetzer Horsei Torah Tavlin. The only antidote to disarm the Yetzer Hara, to get a level of clarity and to see who he really is only through the eyes of Torah. And that's what Shlomo says in Mishlei, Ner Mitzvah V'Torah Or. The Torah is the illuminator. The only way you could see what that reality is only through the eyes of the Torah. Yaakov, the reason why he was the counterforce to Esav, who's the ultimate guile, who blinds people, that's Yaakov. Because Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshiv Olim, he represents Torah, and therefore he's the antidote to that. That's the reason.